it's doing this one thing and I've already built everything around it.
Yeah, you
So
go
that's
and
kind of
you're wandering through the woods, and then next thing you know, you rebuilt all the pieces of your
yeah,
vendor because you were trying to work around it at every point. Yeah.
yeah. You're
That's
trying to build experience on top of the vendor and then you end up just building the vendor.
that's certainly not where you want to be as a vendor. You want to make sure that you have something that's valuable. But fascinating. So you ended up actually building it without knowing it, and then realizing that you had 99% of it and decided to get it over the finish line to just have your own system and not use a vendor anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a lot of the observability was really difficult.
Hey, and welcome to this episode of Build versus Buy, a 30-minute conversation with product and engineering leaders about situations during their career where they've had to decide whether to build or buy. If you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me at Mang-Git@useanvil.com. That's Manggit @useanvil.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating/review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Build vs. Buy podcast. My name is Mang-Git, founder and CEO of Anvil, the fastest way to build software for documents. And today I have Alex Klarfeld, the founder and CEO of Supergood and previously the co-founder of Divvy. Thanks, Alex, for being on the show.
Thanks, Megan, for having me.
Yeah, so as always, we always like to start by having you do a quick introduction about yourself, about your background, and about Supergood.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Alex, like you said, I'm the founder of Supergood. Supergood generates and maintains unofficial APIs, primarily for enterprise portals behind a login. So all those old school platforms that don't have APIs, we build APIs for them. And we do it by means of automated reverse engineering rather than browser automation. So it's a lot faster, way more reliable, and you can make API calls like you would normal APIs. Before Supergood, I was one of the co-founders of a company called Divvy Homes. Divvy helped renters buy their first house. It was really cool. And a lot of the stuff that I worked on and learned from Divvy kind of inspired Supergood today.
Yeah, and actually I met Alex when he was at Divvy. We were both working out of the same, call it co-working space. I think it was like a corner of the firm offices at that point in time. They just shoved us in a corner, but we got access to facilities, I guess. That was the main part of that. Yeah, so Alex, you have a background from Divvy. You build unofficial APIs, which immediately drew my attention to kind of, those big companies like Plaid, where they started out through browser automation, essentially. They would go have people log into their bank accounts and scrape information manually. But if Supergood was around, they could have just used you, right?
So Plaid wrote the book on this stuff. It existed before Plaid, but they were the ones that pioneer it and streamline it. And actually, the founder of Plaid invested in Supergood based on what we're doing. So yeah, you can kind of think of what the early team at Plaid did to reverse engineer mobile apps, banking mobile apps. I think they're legit now. They actually have like real partnerships with banks. But is basically what we do is we build the horizontal platform for you to be able to do that for any portal. So there's a ton of other industries that we can help out.
Yeah, I can only imagine. There's insurance, there's healthcare. I feel like Epic Systems is one of those, just notoriously closed off ecosystems, but also you probably don't want to be reverse engineering their APIs. I've heard they're also very litigious.
I won't confirm or deny, but I'm very familiar with Epic.
Cool. Maybe I would love to dive a little bit deeper into Supergood. Like anything else you can share with us or for any potential users of Supergood out there, like that, why they should use Supergood over doing it themselves. Or I think a lot of times startups just automate with humans, right? So it's like, why would they use Supergood?
Yeah, it's a good question. So most of our customers are operating in these like vertical industries, so prop tech, real estate tech, like you said, insurance tech, health, government, any like industry that has to deal with like old school portals. And the way to think about using Supergood versus anything else is like the first thing is you want to integrate with a platform. Usually you want to do it for one of two reasons. One of which is you want to automate some back office task that is currently being done manually, or you want to build a new feature that is going to attract a whole new subset of customers, powering an integration that just none of your competitors have and just doesn't exist. So once you like decide that, you're like, all right, what do I do? So the first thing that I always recommend is look at the product and see if they have a real API. If they do have a real API, check it out, use that before even considering using Supergood. But a lot of times our customers will look at the official API and be like, there's so much more that I want to do here. And I can't. I just can't. So then they usually call us and we'll give them the whole spiel. And I'm fully transparent about all the technical aspect that we do. And my main pitch is you could do this yourself. I will help you do this yourself. It's not, the interesting part is not the reverse engineering, although I do think it's really cool. It's actually just like maintaining these things in production, knowing when they break, fixing them when they break. And I would say, if you want that knowledge and you want to maintain it forever, then go nuts. A lot of teams have like integrations teams that their job to do it because it's so core to their business. But the question I always ask, is it core to your business? Do you have integration engineers that you want to hire? And you need to hire like multiple of them to do it. But if not, then use us. So that's like the rationale breakdown that I give customers.
Imagine if you were a fintech and you decided that it made sense to just like build all the integrations into every single one of the 3,000 banks in America instead of using Plaid. Do you really want to be maintaining that yourself? Yeah, there's maybe only 3 core banking providers that have terrible APIs, but is it actually competitive advantage to have really deep, like pedantic knowledge about these legacy like banking systems, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like the only reason to build Plaid is if you're going to compete with Plaid, I think.
The shot's fired right there. Cool. That's super interesting. I think I have so many questions around Supergood, and maybe I'll shoot off a couple before we dive into the main meat of today's conversation, which we've already started delving into, I'll be honest, right? Like we're touching on it already. But high level, you said Supergood automates the generation of these APIs. So like, how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm an engineer myself too, and I know you are too, but like most engineers are familiar with like the Chrome Network Inspector. You like load up a web page and you see all the traffic that kind of comes through. You can imagine the thing that we built is that concept on steroids, like a souped up version of the Chrome Network Inspector that goes beyond just the network logging, but like it's actually looking at the pages, the network calls, the interactions. And then behind the scenes, what we've built is basically like a playbook and infrastructure so that we can essentially go to a website and we can perform what we call like an audit. Like how's the page load? How's auth structured? And the kind of concept you can think is once you've seen how one ASP.NET website is built, you've seen them all. And there's like only a finite amount of ways that you can build a site, which means there's only a finite amount of ways you can reverse engineer it. And there's a million different flavors, don't get me wrong. But we kind of have the playbook so that we capture the network calls, we figure out what calls are relevant, and they're not always just network calls. Most of the time they're not. They're usually like page loads, like pulling things from like the actual HTML. I mean, page loads are network calls in some capacity, but we basically look for everything that's not found in JavaScript, like everything that's like in the browser or in the network calls, not in the browser. And then we basically have a set of internal tools that packages it all up and turns it into an API. And since we built so many of these integrations, every net new integration can reference an old integration, not directly, but like learning from the knowledge of, okay, we've seen this website before because this other industry actually uses the same concept, and we can generate them a lot faster. The other whole like core concept is every integration we built is like fully instrumented so that every behind the scenes call is logged, it's tracked, the schemas are logged, the response times are logged to give us like a holistic picture of like actually how these things are functioning. And then what we can do is just, I think like with any LLM application, including our own, the interesting part is the Rails and the tooling and the infrastructure so that LLMs can actually just knock it out of the park. It should be like a T-ball hit. Like everything should be like fully teed up for the LLM. And that's basically what we do is we just invest in all the infrastructure and tooling required to generate these APIs like at scale. There's still a human at the end, human engineer, one of the behind me that's like verifying that the LLM does a good job. And right now we're investing more in like the QA and the eval of it, where it's like, can we actually just automatically like test these integrations at scale so that really a human doesn't have to touch it? But right now it's QA'd by us.
He's literally moving data from here to there. That's why he keeps switching his screen around like that.
Yeah, Dylan's even gone. They're a different breed than us.
Cool. That's fascinating. I just like thinking about it where your instrumentation around all this can also help your system self-heal in a way, right? If something goes wrong, you're automatically notified of it and maybe it could fix itself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what we do. So the whole point is when we first build the integration is to capture like the knowledge book of like, how does the site function? What's like a good state? What's a bad state? And then as the customer uses it, we're just like constantly collecting like all this data of like successful calls, unsuccessful calls. And then it's like building this anomaly model where it's, okay, we find something and then we need to categorize the error. There's a few different concepts of error. The first one is, okay, is it a user error? Do they send data to the platform that like is unexpected, like a validation error or something? Is it a like system error where it's like this site is just like down? It's just, like a lot of times like the underlying site will just break and it's okay. You need to know about that right away. And then you have to be on top of it. You need to notice, like alert the user right away, which is what we do. We're very proactive about this sort of thing. And then the last part is like the changes. Okay. The API suddenly started behaving in a way that we didn't expect. How do we deal with that? And that's where the sort of like self-healing aspect comes in.
Yeah. Got it. Cool. I do have a ton more questions on this, but I do want to get into our main topic. But before we do that, just like, how did you come up with this idea? What was it that got you thinking about this? Was it your work at Divvy Homes? Was it like, tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting story, at least. So I originally started Supergood as an observability company, which meant that we built this tool that you drop in and we tell you what's wrong with your third-party APIs. This was inspired by Divvy. Actually, that's when I think I reached out to you at Divvy, where we had a PDF generator at Divvy that just stopped working like overnight. And it stopped working on a Friday night. And I remember I think I texted you and I was like, I'm on Anvil. Cause like we were buying all our houses on Saturday, Sunday. And like our ops team couldn't do anything. They couldn't send out cause this like vendor went down. So we switched over to Anvil. It took me like an hour. It wasn't like hard at all. It was actually pretty sick. And we got the whole business up and running. But this vendor we paid so much money to was down for a full weekend without any notice. And that pissed me off as like an engineer and a concept. Like, I'm really glad that you guys helped us solve this, but it just pissed me off. So I started Supergood to keep tabs on those sorts of the non-Anvils of the world to figure out like when they fail. But so we started this observability company and we're really good at pointing out problems, but all of our customers were like, cool, what are you going to do about this? Like, you pointing out a problem isn't enough. You have to do something about it.
And as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, just quickly, did not pay Alex to say that. Thank you, Alex. That was very kind.
It's true. It's a true story. So we're like, okay, you're pointing out problems is cool. Like, who cares? But we had this one customer where it was a very interesting application, but they had a lot of these like homegrown integrations close to what we do today at Supergood that were just breaking. And they loved the observability product because they're like, yes, we don't have any observability built into homegrown stuff. And it's awesome that you all are like the first to help us figure this out. So we started working with them and going into their code and fixing things. And it was like right around the time where a lot of the code gen stuff was coming about. So we realized, okay, this is actually something there. And we got known a little bit as being really good at scraping, and scraping has its place. Frankly, I don't think it's that interesting. I think there are a million different sites out there that you can scrape, but the concept, we started getting more and more advanced requests where people were like, okay, can you actually do this behind a login? And that's when we started realizing that there's a lot of things you can Google to find scrapers for, but there's not a lot that lets you like execute this behind a login for various reasons. So that's how the company developed.
Got it. Super fascinating. It's really interesting that you guys moved from just pointing out problems to actually solving problems for a customer, which is ultimately what the customers want. That's pretty exciting.
Hindsight's 2020, but that was the main learning.
Awesome. That's super interesting. Would love to pivot now to just talk about a build versus buy experience that you've had. I'm sure you've had many, both as the co-founder of Divvy and now on the flip side, selling unofficial APIs to other companies. But yeah, do you have a specific scenario or time in mind that I think could be illustrative of this build versus buy decision?
Yes, I do. This might be like a deep cut, so like mostly for engineers, but are you familiar with Temporal as a concept? Temporal's
like yeah, please.
Temporal's a big product. They're like this durable execution job runner. They are like big dogs in a space. Like the best way I can describe them is like, there's a ton of tools for data engineers to monitor jobs like that, some data, but like in terms of like application developers, there's not really like anything outside of, there's Temporal's the big dog. And then there's like these other smaller companies I think are actually like very much cooler than Temporal there's one called Ingest with 2 N's. And then there's one called DBOS that was actually started by my former CEO at my old company. And it's actually really cool. Like the whole durable execution is all like Postgres based, which is sick. So anyways, If you think about Supergood, we like every integration we built is essentially like a job. Like it's like a mini job that needs to be run. And obviously we need to know if it fails, when it fails, and that sort of thing. So we were first starting off and realizing, okay, we actually have like many of these integrations to run. The value add is like being able to maintain them and monitor them. Like the first thing you look at is someone has have to figure this out. Like monitoring like long range jobs is like definitely a solved problem. And it turns out there's like only 3 of these like popular companies where Temporal is like just been the oldest that kind of pride themselves on being like durable job execution. So that was like the first time we're like, okay, what do we do with this? Do we build it ourselves or do we buy a tool like DVOS, Temporal, or Ingest to solve this problem? So that's the first situation. I can pause there.
Yeah, no, that's super fascinating because I feel like building a job queue conceptually is pretty simple. But
Yeah.
I feel like job queues are always the first thing to fall over in any system. It just gets stuck and then you don't know about it. And then whatever you were hoping to accomplish doesn't get done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you pray for like the bells and whistles of stuff you don't want to deal with, automated retries, like alerting, all the stuff you expect to be included in this so that you don't have to build out. And that's what I was expecting, where I was like, okay, someone has to solve this like job queue issue, specifically on the monitoring and the observability part. So that's when we started investigating and say, okay, can we just use Temporal for this? But I've been through a lot of these build versus buy decisions in the past, and I have a framework for it, which is basically, okay, the first question I always ask is it, which is obvious, but just, is it core to your business?
Right.
And if it is core to your business, does this product need to be good so that it becomes your secret sauce? And if the answer is yes, you have to build it internally. If no, then it's okay. That's a good can decision for buy. And then I think the second part of that is, okay, if I do buy it, is there an easy way for me to like integrate it in a way where I can easily rip it out? Can we at least take the concepts that they use and in a future time swap it for like our own job queue or something like that? So I think that's core to the decision-making process, which is how do I buy it in a way that where I could rip it out in the future? And that's easier said than done, either intentionally or not intentionally. As you know, software providers don't make it easy to rip out, and you accidentally fumble in a way where you're like, oh, this is like way stickier than I originally thought, especially if the engineering team grows and everyone's trying to learn this tool. And I think it's another aspect of it too, which is how easy is this tool to onboard new engineers? Is there some sort of knowledge base that every engineer has to go through in order to debug Temporal? That's also a problem. And in Temporal's case, it is very cursed in the sense of it's a very opinionated platform and it's meant for very specific purposes. So we ended up spinning up Temporal and then realizing how opinionated it was and made it very hard to iterate. Speed of iteration is also just core to build versus buy, which is how fast can I make changes to this platform without me having to onboard onto it and figure out its secrets more or less like every time I dig into code.
So it sounds like there's a couple of angles here. Obviously, there's the maintaining optionality if you do buy something. So if you're looking at an option or if you're looking at a solution and you're saying, hey, this looks interesting, but I'm not 100% sure yet. If there's a way to maintain optionality to rip it out or implement something else very quickly, that would be part of your decision. If it's easier to maintain that optionality, you're probably more likely to try out this solution that exists. And then as you're digging into it, as you're like integrating deeper into it, you start realizing where all the skeletons are hidden in the system, right? Every system, no matter how well designed it is, there are trade-offs that have been made, and those show up as skeletons or as tribal knowledge that you have to pass down through word of mouth to other engineers as they are debugging the system. So that also eats up time and resources at your company, what that could be used on building something else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then like, I always feel like there's like kind of a hybrid approach of build versus buy where it's like an open source, like some Apache tool that like does the same thing as the commercial version. And then that's like a nice middle ground where you like just try to find the parallel product where, okay, if we don't want to buy this, what can we piggyback off of in order to make it as close as possible?
It's fascinating you mentioned that. It was like, we actually had that similar decision when we started Anvil, which is, do we use an existing PDF, like commercial PDF system? There's a ton of them. Every legacy industry has PDFs. Or do we use this open source library called PDFbox, which is also Apache, under the Apache Foundation, which I think like it does everything that we really needed it to do, but it was also just a little bit clunky. It was written in Java, and just the amount of work that we needed to put in to host it, make it a web application, was pretty high. But ultimately we decided that having access to the underlying code, as well as just like not having to pay a massive bill to another PDF, like another service provider, because PDFs are the ultimate enterprise like file format, so everything's expensive. Made sense for us to own it, and I think it's been the right decision thus far, in the sense that because we own the PDF engine, we are able to do a lot to really accelerate increase the performance of the underlying PDF engine that other systems just simply don't have. We were able to twist those knobs ourselves to get it to where we think is the best versus buying an off-the-shelf solution and just like pestering support to add it into their feature backlog.
Yeah, and I think you like touched on something with the PDF engine that like you also can get value out of for build versus buy. Are there concepts that you did correctly? Maybe they're implemented badly, but there's like concepts that you can borrow and say, like, all right, like I get what they're trying to do, and we can borrow that when we like build our own solution.
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. Just like it's in some ways it's kind of like guide that maybe you don't need to follow perfectly, but at least it's like it's a map. It's a map. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Cool. So back to these long running job queues and stuff. It sounds like you did start working on implementing Temporal, but there were some hiccups along the way. I guess tell me a little bit more about that process for you and your team as you guys were implementing this long running job queues.
Yeah, so we like grew pretty quick. So we have a bunch of customers, and then we're maniacal about support. Like every time an issue with any API comes about, like the customer is notified like right away. We have part of our whole thesis with our product is that has to be like really good. Like they should be able to audit every issue that comes about and be able to like trace the logs. And we should know about issues before they do, like full stop all the time. So we got running pretty quick. And then we're like, oh shoot, we actually need to like add in this observability layer. And I was like, okay, what can we get for cheap in the next 2 days? What can we do to just get this done? And that's when we start saying, okay, maybe Temporal will just give us some stuff for free with maybe there's a little bit of implementation cost. So it was working like, okay, so the first, I want to call it like 10 integrations where we just had like real customers. And then it's like the next, like the N+1, you're like, all right, this one has to behave a little bit differently. And then you have to relearn Temporal to be like, it's like more magic that you have to implement or do it in this way. And it's just like compiling up, okay, some of the jobs we wanted to be able to retry, but some of them we didn't, because some of them were mutations where they like modify a downstream system. And it's, can you like discern? And they have all these like hard coded concepts like activities and workflows and like very opinionated ways of like how you should set up retries. It was all or nothing in a lot of capacities. And it just felt like we were constantly like turning this like square peg in a round hole. We're like, maybe it'll fit if you keep doing this. And then once you've built software for long enough, you like recognize that as this is like an anti-pattern. Like, dang, we need to get rid of Temporal or our lives are going to be bad. And like when you're small, like that's a pretty easy decision to make. That's how it happens. You just keep trying to add features to it. And you're like, you hate your life every time you try to do it. Or you have to relearn. Yeah, no one wants to touch it. And you start trying to figure out like creative ways to like work around it. And then you kind of have to pull back and you're like, wait a second, we're like working around a vendor. That's like not a good thing, which I don't, even our own customers, like you shouldn't have to work around a vendor, including us.
Yeah. Okay. So you started hitting these walls with Temporal. It's like the way you need to do stuff didn't match their worldview on how things should be implemented. And so
yeah,
it's like, I assume you started looking at other options right at that point.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing was like, okay, can we go to these other vendors like DBOS and Ingest, both like way more like developer friendly and like more modern. So like fit in well with the stack, way less opinionated. So it was like it's like a better option. The kind of like hard part when if you're gonna choose a vendor and you were start with one of the smaller incumbents, is you just get nervous about the level of documentation support. Like it's a big bet, especially with like core infrastructure, to bet on a smaller company unless they're like documented out the wazoo and you like understand everything. And like a good litmus test I always do is I always just email the CEO and I'm like, do they respond to me if I like have any questions? So like side channel, there's a company called Masra that they're awesome. They're not related to Temporal at all. They do agentic workflows with like TypeScript native, and emailed the team and they got back to me for 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, this is like a very responsive company. Their documentation is crazy. They also wrote a book. They have everything that all the signals point to like, you should use this software instead of building your own agentic workflow. And those are like the golden, we use Masra today because of this. We don't use Temporal because it's no shot of any sort of responsiveness. So it's like, you start looking at other options and you're looking at like level of documentation, responsiveness. Do they invite you to a Slack channel? Like we're a small company, so you reserve this to
Right.
larger companies, but like Masra invited us to a Slack channel, was like answering our questions live. You're like, okay, this is like a small company that I can bet on because they're so responsive and they're so good and they just want to be better. And I think that goes like a long way when you're like evaluating build versus buy options.
Yeah, being able to actually get support when you need it, because you're stuck and you like their documentation isn't good enough, and so you really need to have to get somebody on the line to answer your question. And I think this is like this is kind of the fallacy of incumbents, right? If you go out there, if you're going to start a company today and you're like, where should I host it? There's a couple of large hyperscalers that you would use: AWS, Google, Azure, whatever. But you start using them knowing that you're never going to get anybody on the line. Like you know that your support is going to be like Stack Overflow in the past or ChatGPT today is like, hey, something's broken. Here's the error message. You go fix it. And it's not going to be somebody who works at AWS unless you personally work there and know the engineers that build it. Fortunately, they are like big enough now that there's enough people that know it that is sharing the knowledge back to the community. But between small startup and that scale, you're like in a no man's land.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like you use AWS because everyone uses AWS and you're like, I'm confident that if I get stuck, I can throw a rock down Market Street and hit someone who can help me like develop something. That's like what you're looking for versus anything else. You just have to be like world-class in terms of responsiveness and support. And I think that's why a lot of like smaller companies just like skyrocket, just like the level of support to like even other smaller companies is like crazy. And like they also have to like consciously invest in this because like they're probably making money on bigger, larger companies and use cases. So they need to like value their time better. But the fact that they're so responsive even for smaller companies is just like such a clear winner indicator of a good product.
Yeah, I would say even if you just reframe the value of their time a little bit, where the good feelings, the good vibes that the community gets from interacting with your support then translates into word of mouth. And I think that's honestly worth a lot more in today's go-to-market motion than like paying for ads, I would say. I think like ads have kind of been devalued completely, and word of mouth seems to be one of the few ways of taking something to market that still works decently well. If you have a good product. If you have a bad product, word of mouth is probably not the thing you want. Everybody's
usually like anti stuff, but not to glaze you and Anvil too much, but that was, as the youth say, that was like at Divvy, it was like Friday night. I texted you, like maybe you met me like once or twice and you're like, yeah, we'll like get you on like right now. It was like probably 9:00 on a Friday night. You probably had better things to do, but we were like on board by 10 p.m. It was crazy. And like Divvy kept using Anvil after that because of this reason. And I don't even remember the other vendor that we were like using to like generate PDFs at this point, just because it was like so solid.
Alex is going to tweet my phone number out after this. And then I'm sure it's already out there at this point. I get plenty of spam calls. If you want to find me, I'm not hard to find. Cool. Okay. Back to build versus buy. Well, you guys started looking at other vendors. Did you guys eventually move off to another vendor, or did you decide to build something yourself? What was the actual outcome here?
Yeah, the outcome was like wanting to build experience for customers to like for engineers to be able to like debug, not just like debug, but like just see what's going on. Anytime you like put your trust in a vendor, like transparency is like key, I believe. And we really just want to show the full observability gamut of what is this like company, what is Supergood doing behind the scenes? Like, how are they monitoring this? And like, how can I actually trust them that they're doing a good job? And it was because of all these experiences we wanted to build, and we realized we couldn't actually build it on Temporal. As we were evaluating, we were building like infrastructure around Temporal to like basically double log and do things like that Temporal was doing, but like storing it in our own system. And it came to a natural point where we just rip it out. We're like, oh, like literally we came about one day, we're like, oh, we've already built everything that we're looking for because we had to in this whole process of finding a new vendor. So now that's the easy decision, which like not all of them get out this way, but you get frustrated enough with the vendor, you start building around it. And at some point you realize, oh, I don't actually need this anymore. It's doing like this one thing and I've already built everything around it.
You're wandering through the woods, and then like next thing you know, you've rebuilt all the pieces of your vendor
Yeah.
because you were trying to work around it at every point.
Yeah. You're
I
trying
see.
to build the experience on top of the vendor, and then you end up just building the vendor.
That's certainly not where you want to be as a vendor. You want to make sure that you have something that's valuable. But fascinating. So you ended up actually building it without knowing it, and then realizing that like you had 99% of it, and decided to just get it over the finish line to just have your own system and not use a vendor anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It was like just a lot of the observability was really difficult. We used Temporal at Divvy too, and like I had a similar experience where it was like just really hard to build on top of and fool me once kind of thing. But again, like it was like a different situation. Like it would been like 5, 7 years at this point. So it was like ideally the product grows and it like gets better, but the big companies they just don't. So like I saw the writing on the walls, and as an engineer, like your natural instinct is to like just do what worked in the past without thinking too hard about it, and then that's how you end up at these conclusions. Oh, I already built everything because I've seen this movie before, and you like not sleepwalk through it, but you just like naturally do that.
You want to solve
because
all
you've
the
seen so much
problems, right? It's like take off the shelf solutions that you've done before, or things that you've done before, and you want to solve a new problem.
Yeah, it's all powered by customers, because customers are like, how do I see this? And they're like, hey, Temporal, how do I see this? And Temporal's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, I have to solve this for a customer. So that's just like the natural push is like you get pulled by your customers to do better. And then you just see who's holding you back as soon as that, like those questions start to come up. And sometimes it points to a vendor.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I guess the arc of the story was that you guys bought, but the buying of a vendor solution resulted in you like subconsciously or unconsciously building it, replicating it. And then by the time you realize it, you're just like, oh, wait, actually, we can just rip this out because we already actually rebuilt everything at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know that this is one, maybe this is going to show how old I am, but there's a Johnny Cash song about how he worked on a car assembly line and he stole the pieces for his car, like one piece at a time over the course of multiple years. And so at the end of it, he had a new Cadillac or something, but it was built with parts from like 1960 to 1967 or something like that. It feels kind of like you were doing that, and then next thing you know, you actually had the whole car.
Yeah, that's right. It's I didn't pay attention in philosophy class in college, but it's like the shift of theses, I think, or something like that, where it's like the same sound concept.
Yeah, you like pull out each plank at a time, and then next thing you know, you replace the whole ship. Is it even the original ship at that point?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Cool. Okay, so fascinating. I think this is actually the first time we've had somebody that went from buying and then unconsciously building and then realizing that they had what they already needed and just getting rid of the original vendor. Because most of the time it's like when I have these conversations with product leaders and founders, it's, oh, there was a clear point and we just made a decision. I guess founders tend to be have pretty high executive function. There's like deciding now we're moving this way, but it feels like this was a lot more natural and organic to get you guys to where you are today.
Yeah, I think if your culture is just like ship focused, where you're just like ship, it like actually comes about in the same capacity. Our planning means are very short, and I think that's just like nature of like early stage companies is you just keep working until it works.
Yeah, the plan is to keep doing it. That's the plan.
Exactly.
Like you can't really
keep customers happy and keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to plan, do like quarterly planning or yearly planning. It's just like, we're going in this direction. Let's figure out where in this direction, if we're still going in the right direction. That's about it.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. That was an awesome story. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for sharing. I love that you guys kind of just like organically happened upon this. Would love to just wrap up this episode with a couple of fun questions that we always ask our guests. The first one is, share something that you are excited about working on. It could be personal or professional, but something that, you know, you would be willing to share with the audience that you're working on and would love to talk about.
Yeah, I think like one of the things was Supergood. So we, like I said, we generate and maintain operative word, these unofficial APIs, and the tooling that we've built has gotten us like pretty crazy close to one-shotting like a lot of the integrations. So the idea is like we're building these integrations internally, and like we are on the hook. So we will both build and maintain these integrations for our customers using our tools, but that it's not like the long-term plan for the company. The whole plan is to give the average engineer the tools to build these integrations for themselves. So that's the thing I'm most excited about right now. Claude? The
average engineer is just going to be Claude.
Claude. Yeah.
The alligator, I guess. For those who live in SF, you might know who the alligator is, but yeah, RIP.
Yeah. Sorry, pour one out. Yeah, no, yeah, Claude. It's funny you mentioned that. Like, I actually bought the domain toolcalling.com because in a future where like Claude is the engineer or like these bots are like running around the world, they need tools. Like, it's foolish for the bot to replicate the wheel every time they want to update a work order in some property management system. So the whole goal, like the end goal of Supergood, is we want to be the tool generator, this like unofficial tool generator where bots can come in and use our tools, but we can also generate the tools and then also use our platform to figure out what's going wrong if something changes. Like, I think one of the hard parts of a lot of the code gen stuff is like, there's no feedback loop. Like, you generate code, you push it into production, but there's no like loop that comes back to say, hey, the code actually sucks. You need to fix it, or it's changed in some way. And that's what I'm really excited about with Supergood.
Claude writes tests or deletes them for you to make them pass, right?
Yeah, it'll keep writing tests until it does a good job.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Let me write some more tests.
Yeah, but like even like normal, like official APIs, like you don't know how they're going to work until you're like running them in production. But like at that point, it's too late. You're already like involved the human if you saw an edge case that you haven't seen. So what we're trying to do with Supergood is close that loop. Okay, we built the observability platform. We need that loop to come back so that we really don't have to think about the APIs. And I just haven't seen any like good products on the market that like close the code generation loop. Like Cursor's sick, Claude Code's sick, Codex is sick, but like they stop and end when you press like deploy into production. That sucks. And I think that's what we're excited about building and doing better than that.
Self-healing, like you eventually, these agents can see how the code that they wrote is being executed in the wild and automatically just go fix it for you.
Yeah, and it's not interesting to like unit test a function that converts dates. Like everyone can do that. Like Claude can write infinity tests that can do that. But like the interesting part is we're interfacing with some system you don't have control over. You actually have to build up like a knowledge base of like, how does that system work in production? How do I need to adjust myself to understand how that system works? Like, that's just the internet. Like that should just exist today.
That's a bunch of black boxes connected to each other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sucks. That's the hard part. So that's what we're excited to fix.
Awesome. Cool. And then last question for the audience here is really, what is a product that you've purchased recently that you would you either loved it, you would buy again, or you would not ever buy again and not recommend to anybody?
Yeah, I think I like alluded to before, but this new, like new, they're not new, like a new in our world, but it's called Masra. They like just make it really easy, like TypeScript native, make it really easy to like build and evaluate like any sort of like LLM system in production. Like I said, the founding team is killer, which also I think happens to be part of the support team.
Yeah,
nicest people. Yeah, I know. I was like still like talking about like how nice the people are versus the product. Like, it just goes a long way of like how much you like the product versus the people that are building it. It just made our sort of like workflows and development so much faster. Just based on like it feels like it's built for us. Like it's built for like our specific code base, which makes it like really nice. They literally wrote the book on this stuff. They have a book that they give out to folks on like how to build these like agentic workflows in a practical capacity with all the observability and tracing included. So I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Masra. Maybe our next guest can be one of the founders from Masra. I'm going to have to cold email them and see if they respond.
I'll ping them in Slack to see if they want.
Do it.
If you want to. Okay.
Awesome. Alex, it's always a lot of fun speaking with you and catching up, and really enjoyed hearing about your story about buying, then building unconsciously, subconsciously, and then actually just shipping your own thing. Thanks for sharing that story with us. And yeah, maybe we'll have you back on the podcast when you actually solve the whole like closed loop problem. When you become the rails for all agents to self-heal in the future. That'd be pretty awesome.
I would love to come back. It was a ton of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks everybody, and talk to you later.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you found this show valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or here on YouTube. We'd love if you could leave us a rating and/or a review, as that helps others find this podcast. See you next time.